business leaders.
So you just had like your 1 year anniversary, right?
Yes.
Like this month?
Yeah, June 3rd.
Okay. All right. Well, congratulations.
Thank you so much.
How has that journey been for you?
It has been kind of crazy. When I first launched Bais, I kind of didn't know what I was getting into. I was leaving an agency of like 4.5 years. I was kind of looking at getting into freelancing. I had looked at a few other agencies because I really just wanted the ability for flexibility. I wanted to be able to work from wherever. I wanted to kind of work with more clients that I wanted to work with. And so I started off just kind of wanting to freelance. And so many people from like different areas of my life came up to me and were like, Bailey, you should really start your own business. Like so many different people. And I also listened to this one podcaster. Her name's Angie Lee. I don't know if you've ever heard of her, but her whole thing is like ready's a lie, like write yourself a permission slip. So I did it, and I came up with the name Bais, and I kind of got all my stuff together, and it took off really fast. And so I kind of thought I just wanted it to be me, and I would kind of run all the PR and do some social media, but I just kept getting more and more interest, and so I've started to grow my team. Nice.
Did you have anybody close to you tell you it was not a good idea? Did you have anybody go, oh, that's not a great idea, it's not as secure, it's risky? Did you have any of that?
I definitely had people in my life that were honest with me about launching your own business isn't easy, and not that I thought it was easy, but no, most people in my life was supportive. I mean, through the grapevine, I heard people saying, oh, I can't believe like she went off on her own, or stuff like that, but I think that's natural with anyone kind of going off on their own and starting their own thing.
Yeah. So I read that part of the reason, like you just said, was you wanted to do it to have more flexibility, to go fishing. You fish a lot.
Yeah.
How is that work? Have you gotten to that point yet? Has it turned out to be as flexible as you had hoped?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say I'm working any less hours. I'm probably working more hours than before, but I'm so blessed that I'm able to go down to Key West and fish so much with my husband and his family. And I'm one of 4 kids. And we're all in different states. And they all have had their own kids. So I just kind of felt like had all these opportunities, and I didn't want to look back at my 20s and feel like I missed out or wasn't there for my family or didn't take the chance to go fish on a Wednesday if things were slow because I could work on Saturday. So no, I've definitely taken advantage of it. I actually have probably spent like 40% of the last 3-4 months in Key West. So it's been awesome.
That's amazing. I also read that part of your plan for this year was to build out a team or a small team. How is that going so far?
It's going good. I was kind of struggling at first. So back in December, I kind of hit a point where I had taken on as much as I could handle by myself. In October, my younger sister actually was kind of looking for a part-time job, so I had hired her as my assistant at the time. She's now grown into one of my social media managers and is awesome, killing it. It's kind of cool to see her grow like in this career as well, but between the two of us, I had handled everything I could handle. So I was kind of at a point where it's like, do I want to go into an agency? Like, what path do I want to take? I feel like sometimes agencies can get bad raps. They're overpriced or they overpromise, and I didn't want to pigeonhole myself. So I've kind of just been calling myself a boutique team, even though technically I am a PR and social media agency. But I'm trying to really like niche down how I'm hiring. So instead of having a social media manager who also is the videographer and also does all the graphic design and also does everything, that if you're my social media manager, you're just managing writing, you're just that I'm hiring like a videographer, they just do videography. If you're my PR person, you're just focusing on your clients and media pitching. And so I've been contracting a lot of people, but when I talk with them before I contract them part-time, I'm just very open of, this is my goal, I'm looking to grow my business, and here's my mission. Like, if you're willing to go on this journey with me, great, let's partner. And I found a bunch of people, not just here locally, like my graphic designers based out of Seattle. One of my social media managers is in Texas. So it's been going really good.
So how are you thinking about scaling? Is that the plan? Sort of you bring on part-time contractors, and then the intention is to grow to the level of work where you can start bringing certain functions on full-time?
Yeah,
or do you plan to keep the contractor model and keep it lean? What do you think?
No, I want to hire everyone full-time. I have a few contractors who have been very honest of, I love the flexibility. Like, I just want to be a contractor. That's great. I'm willing to work with them. But no, the goal is to have a team that all works for Bais.
Okay. And how are you thinking about scaling that out? Are you building processes and documenting things so that when you bring people on, they have, materials and things they can study to get up to speed? And how are you doing all that?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So I just hired a business coach, and he's based in Seattle, and he has really helped. It's honestly something I hadn't thought about. And one of the things that he's kind of ingrained in me is frustrations are unmet expectations. Mm-hmm. And I feel like I was hiring contractors and getting frustrated because I felt like they weren't doing the work or wasn't getting done what I had expected. And it's because I didn't have all my systems in place. And so I've spent the last 3 months really fleshing out, like getting clear on our mission, our core values. If you're our publicist, like, what are our client expectations that we were talking about? What are the processes that we're going through for media pitching? When we earn media, like, how are we helping our clients promote that? And making sure we're thanking the reporter, thanking the podcaster. And it's really changed the game for me.
Yeah. There's always that moment of frustration when you think, well, by the time I get this contractor trained and everything I need them to know, I could have done it myself.
Yeah.
But then you realize, like, if you go through the effort to document that process and literally just write it down, once you've done it once, it's much easier the next time. Then you can just hand that off to people.
Yeah, exactly. So we really have, like, fleshed out systems now of, even if someone wasn't a publicist or social media manager, they should be able to go in and fully understand the job at hand.
How did you find the business coach?
So it's kind of a funny story. As I mentioned, I was stuck in December, so I was kind of just scrolling through Instagram one day, and I saw one of his Instagram reels, and it was talking about whether you should remain a freelancer or become, like, an agency owner. And at the time, I was like, oh my goodness, this is exactly everything that I'm currently processing and struggling and just praying about. And he had said that if you think you doing all the work and helping your clients is self-fulfilling, imagine building a team, nurturing that team who is then helping these clients, helping 6 times the amount of clients, for instance, that you could help on your own, how good that would feel. Mm-hmm. And I don't know why, it just really resonated with me. So I followed him, and then about 3 months ago, I heard him on one of his Instagram stories mentioning, like, business coaching. So I kind of just reached out, and we just really hit it off. So it's 2, like, group coaching sessions weekly. So, like, Tuesdays are, like, Q&As, and all, like, the different agency owners from across the U.S. can kind of bring questions and chat, and kind of like a mastermind group. Mm-hmm. And then Thursdays we always have, like, different topics.
How many people are in those groups?
I don't know off the top of my head, but I would say there's probably 12 of us.
And before you found this person, mm-hmm. had you ever considered coaching before? Was this ever something that was top of mind for you?
Yeah, I'm very big into, like, always learning and growing and finding mentors. And so I have a few mentors in my life that just, like, naturally happened. And I had interviewed a few business coaches, but nothing really clicked with me. When you just hop on a phone, and they were all great people, but it just didn't seem like the best fit for myself or what I was looking for. Mm-hmm. And it was nice. His name's Austin Snyder. I think that's how you pronounce his last name. And he was also industry specific for me. And so it just kind of clicked and made sense.
Yeah, I think coaching is something that's not top of mind for a lot of business people in particular. Mm-hmm. And I think there's almost a stigma around it sometimes. It's like, well, I was hired to be in this leadership position. I'm supposed to know what I'm doing. You know, if I have to hire a coach, am I really, you know, you get that imposter syndrome type of thing. But I run into more and more people, super successful people, who have either done coaching or they've had a very purposeful pursuit of finding mentors and things like that. And just more and more you hear that that's something that people are discovering. I know a lot of the mentors in my life, I've asked them, like, what do you think's made you successful? Because I kind of had that same mentality of, well, if you have a business coach, does that make you any less of a leader? Does that make you any less? But all the top mentors I know, successful people in my life, they all at some point have had a business coach. Yeah. Tell me about create before you consume. I read a post that you put out there, and it was, you know, kind of tips and tricks and things like that. But there was a line about creating before consuming. Tell me about that. Yeah, so I think that's more for social media, but I feel like sometimes if you are in the creative space, it is so easy to spend an hour scrolling, and then you get to a point where, like, well, it's my turn to post, and you get that imposter syndrome, or you feel like maybe what you have to say isn't as good as what someone else has to say. Who's going to find this valuable? You kind of go down that rabbit hole. And create before you consume just means if you have a few ideas, like, write them down and kind of get all your thoughts out, get all your ideas out. And then I think it's fine to scroll, like, look at trends, what other people are doing. But if you already have those written down before you're consuming everything, I think it's easier to just go back to that list and feel confident posting than the vice versa. Yeah, I think that applies even broader than just to creatives too, because I think people can get caught up in reading and trying to educate themselves and figuring out the best way to do things and you know, trends and things like that. And you can just do that forever and not ever get around to executing on it. So, you know, creating content is one piece of it, but any sort of business strategy that you are hoping to implement, you can read about it forever. But doing it is a different thing, and doing it is often very difficult once you get into it. And, you know, you made another point about, you know, doing these things first thing before you get into other activities and sort of carving out space for the important things first thing in the morning before everything else starts flying at you. And I thought that was really relevant. I know not everyone's a morning person, but that's how I operate my days. When I wake up after I've had, like, my me time, I put my phone in the other room and I don't even look at my emails. And the day before, I kind of write out, like, all my tasks, and I always have, like, my 3 top priorities for the next day. So I'll just knock out those 3 top priorities. So by 10, I can go grab my phone, I can hop on any calls, I can then address things that need to be addressed. Any other, like, routine things you do to start your day? I practice gratitude, which I know sounds cheesy, but do you do a journal? Do you write it down? Yeah, I do. Whether it's a daily devotional or the gratitude journal or anything like that, it really helps get my mindset just right, and it helps me wake up and not first thing think about my business. I'm thinking about other things in my life. Maybe that's my husband, my family, friends, and then I can just make breakfast, grab a coffee, and then get to work. Get to work. Very good. When should a business bring on a PR firm or a PR consultant? At what point? Yeah, so there's typically 3 different things I recommend before you bring on a PR firm. I would say making sure your social media is up to date. Social media and PR is, like, so intertwined nowadays, as like modern and traditional PR lines are kind of blurring. So depending if you're a CEO, like, make sure you have your LinkedIn and it's active and you're posting once a month, whatever you can handle. Hire someone to take care of it. Just reporters, before they do any stories, they're definitely checking your Instagram, because if they're taking the time to write on you, like, it's always good to share what they are taking their time to publish. So making sure your social media is up to date, asking yourself if you can handle, like, any more clients, any more product right now. I have brands that will come to me and be like, hey, we're so stressed. We have so much coming in. We can't even handle it, but we want to do PR. And I
I'm just always very transparent. I'm like, well, if you can't currently handle all your current clients, I think you should probably get some systems in place, make sure just everything's running smoothly, and then we can get PR. Because once you start landing media placements, it generates brand awareness, brand visibility. Like it ultimately leads to more sales. So just making sure the clients set up for success in the long run. And then knowing your audience, I would say, is the third thing before coming to a PR firm. And that's definitely something that your PR firm can help you with. But knowing who you're talking to. I talk to so many people and like, well, this person and this person and this person. I'm like, well, that's great, but who's that person? And I like to get really specific, so I think you should name them. Is that Brad? Is he single or married? Where does he eat? Does he work out? What's his occupation? Because then when we're crafting your messaging, we're knowing that everything we're doing, you're talking specifically to your audience.
Do you find that your clients have not gone through that exercise? And I ask because that's getting into marketing. So that's like persona development and things like that. And if you're working with an established company and say they have an advertising agency or they have a marketing department, presumably a lot of them would have gone through that exercise. Do you find that the people you work with have advanced to that level, or are you working with people who have not quite gotten there yet?
It's a mix, but some people, I really find someone who has all three. So maybe they know who they're talking to and they're ready for the next step in their business, but they don't have a social media presence. Or they have a social media presence, they're ready for the next step, and they haven't done that audience. So there's always kind of something missing that we can help guide them, and then we'll start putting together thought leadership angles, executive profiles, whatever that may be.
Okay. So what does that content strategy look like? So it does sound like there's a real blurring between PR and social media. Like a lot of what you're talking about is social media best practices and things like that. So is that what you focus on? Is it a content strategy that you build out?
It really depends on the client. I have clients who are just social media. I have clients who are just PR. They have their own social team. So once media hit publishes, we'll work with the social team on just best practices for what to do once you have a media hit. So it just really depends on the client's needs at the time.
What are some best practices for, if a business happens to attract some media attention? What do you advise them to do with that?
There's so much you can do with it. If you have, and just making sure you're sharing it. If you have social media pages, like pushing it out, again, your LinkedIn, Facebook, whatever makes sense depending on the media hit. If it's a podcast, maybe it's an image of yourself with a snippet of the podcast and then directing people to the podcast page. I always recommend for clients to also have like a tab on their website that's in the news, something like that, because that also helps with their own SEO, but also it lives on your site and just helps with brand credibility when people are checking you out. If you have newsletters, including it in your newsletters, sharing with family, friends, all that good stuff.
What about when things go wrong? So I think when a lot of people think about PR, the things that come to mind are like, Exxon has an oil spill, and so you call in the PR people to help manage that. Is that, number one, is that something that you do or specialize in? Is that like a specialty within PR, or is that just something that's always part of the PR process? Like, do companies have separate firms they work with for crisis management versus just a general PR firm? How does all that work?
I don't typically do crisis management, but I also think that kind of comes with the type of clients that I'm niching down into. But most companies don't do crisis management, or there's another PR firm. So I think if you're a larger PR firm, you probably have a crisis communications department within your company. But some people will outsource it. Some people just handle it. I think it also depends on how big the crisis is and all that type of material. But I think in the past, public relations, people have always thought it's either crisis management or it's like a celebrity reputation management. And I think PR is turning into being more proactive, like getting ahead of the curve, putting that positive messaging out there, that thought leadership that's just building more credibility for you and your company.
So do people really care about following companies on social media? I mean, a lot of this and a lot of things you see are, PR companies, and they're managing company Facebook profiles and LinkedIn profiles and, putting out sort of messaging under the company brand umbrella. Do consumers really care about that? Do they want to follow companies on social media?
If you're asking, in my personal opinion, I think it is so important for companies to be on social media. I think now more than ever, people care about where they're buying from and that company's values. And I think it's really important for companies to be sharing their values, sharing what they're doing, how are they helping the community, just stuff like that customers could relate to. I think when brands, which is all about PR, like brands building that story, and it just drives relatability with your customers.
Should that message come from the brand? Should companies use influencers? Should they have spokespeople? Should the message come from the CEO? Like, is it more powerful if it's coming from a person and you associate the messaging with a person, or just the general company brand? How do you think about that?
I've never thought about that before, but I think it's definitely both the brand and the leadership. I think your leadership team should set an example for the rest of the company. And I mean, you're nurturing your employees, you're building them up, and that's what you're growing them into is. So I think leadership should be sharing that messaging as well as your brand.
How should leadership do that? Like, if you were speaking to a group of business leaders, how would you make the case that they should be carving out some time from their busy schedule running a business to do social media and to do PR?
I think it comes naturally for most executives. I always tell like my CEOs or leaders that I work with in PR that things that you think is super like simple for other people in different industries, like that's like a mind-blowing tip or fact. And so just simplifying like your everyday and breaking that down, and then reaching out to PR or hiring a publicist and having them help you put your thought leadership out there. I mean, you're in your industry every day. You know the predicted trends that are coming up. You know what's changing in your industry. So just working with someone to help craft that message and put that out there, and then that's someone else who's helping you tell your story. Right.
Are there any best practices around how leaders should do that? Like, do you work with your clients and have them, do you give them guidelines? Say, listen, you should be, posting on LinkedIn twice a week or whatever, or you should be creating an Instagram reel, every couple of days. Like, how do you advise them to actually execute?
I think it's first sitting down and feeling what's most comfortable for them, like learning their story and what they can do on a weekly, monthly basis that they can stick to. Because I feel like for social media, consistency is key. Mm-hmm. So if you can commit to a once a week LinkedIn post, go for it. You don't need to go crazy. But if for you, that's 2 Instagram reels a month where you're hopping on and talking about trends or just sharing your struggles or anything like that, just set a schedule for yourself and stick to it. So I normally sit down with the client and help them figure out what's most realistic for them, and then how can their team help support them and hold them accountable.
And how well does that work?
Very well.
Works well?
Yeah.
They don't ever just say, listen, I don't have time for this. Can you guys just make stuff for me and post it?
I mean, you definitely do get that. But I think once you explain to them the value of why it's so important that they're sharing their thought leadership, I think the execution is typically the struggle. So they've hired you to either help them, or you're helping them help their team help them.
Makes sense. What do you think about platforms? TikTok has grown very fast. I was reading this morning that people are making a case that it's actually bigger than Google now in terms of time spent. It's like the biggest web property on the internet.
Yeah, that's crazy.
They were also saying that, it's sort of stepping on YouTube's space now, and they were talking about someone who had a plumbing leak or something in their house, and they watched them go to TikTok to search for how to fix it, whereas in the past you would have thought about you always go to YouTube for those things. So what do you think about TikTok and some of the other emerging platforms?
I think TikTok is super important depending on just your brand. for all social media, I don't feel like every brand needs to be a mile wide and inch deep. I think you just need to pick where your audience is on and focus on that. But that being said, video itself is just super important right now. All the platforms, emerging platforms, it's all video. So you don't need a huge production team to hop on and share your thoughts, talk about your brand, share your products, just making the effort to do it. But TikTok specifically, I mean, I'm guilty. I'm on it. I can scroll for an hour, but it's just different. I feel like TikTok can be so positive. It's not like Facebook where maybe someone's putting on a rant, or it's also going more older. I feel like there's such a wide age range on TikTok, and there's kind of something for everyone.
Do you have a lot of clients using it?
No, I actually don't have any clients using TikTok.
No? Are you encouraging them to? Are you experimenting with it? Or are you... Because I've also heard companies say, you know what, we are marketing companies saying we're trying to figure it out first and figure out what works before we advise clients on it because it's very new. Where are you on that spectrum?
I'm definitely playing around with it with Bais and also just my personal fishing brand. But when it comes to clients, I haven't really seen a need yet for my current clients to have it. I don't want to like overwhelm them with too much too fast, but as I move Bais forward in the next year, we are focusing a lot more on video specifically. So I think I'll see a lot more TikTok content coming soon.
Where are you distributing most of the video that you're currently producing?
Instagram.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Why?
Just because I've seen in the last few months that static posts just aren't performing as well. I know for a while the algorithm was just pushing out anyone who is using Reels, but I think it's just easier. Like, people are lazy by nature, I think sometimes, and I think if they're watching a video, it's easier for them just to listen to what you're saying, then scroll to the next thing, than a long caption that would say the exact same thing. So it's just fun. Our clients are really enjoying getting on video, just something different. I think sometimes you can show more of a product or a brand or personality over video rather than just a static image. So one of our core values is we're adventurous. So we like to just stay on top of trends, have fun, like take creative risks, whether that's social or PR, and kind of see where it takes us or our clients.
If a company has really just been doing text and static posts, how do you advise them to get started doing video? What's the way to dip your toe in? Because it can be intimidating for people.
Just start. Yeah. I think, again, whether you hire someone, do it yourself. Like, I know if I post something that's myself, sometimes I can't even listen to it until it's been the 24 hours on stories, or I'll take it down. I think it's natural to be overcritical of yourself, or again, the imposter syndrome, and just feel like maybe what you're sharing isn't valuable. And just know that there's someone out there who'll be either touched or will relate to what you're sharing. And even if you're just reaching that one person, that's important.
Yeah, I think people also overestimate how many people they're going to reach with any one particular piece of content. I think maybe it was Gary Vaynerchuk who was talking about this one time, because he's a hustle, do more, make more content. And his point was, and I think it makes sense, don't get over yourself. Like, you're going to post something, and even if it's not that great, it's only going to live for seconds. You're going to fly through somebody's feed and be gone. And even if it's something you feel like wasn't your best performance, they're not going to remember it. And if you're not looking back at your content, like when I first launched Bais, if I didn't look back and almost be embarrassed about, not like embarrassed, but look back and be like, oh, I could have worded that better, I could have taken a better photo, I think it just means that you're not growing. And right. So I think to sometimes look back, and it's important to look back and see that growth. Yeah. How do you differentiate your firm in a crowded marketplace, right? There's no shortage of marketing agencies and PR agencies and social media agencies. How do you differentiate yourself? I think when it comes to Tampa specifically, it would be my niche. I'm really trying to niche down into travel and lifestyle, hospitality. There's only a few other companies in the Tampa Bay area. I mean, I would say Press PR and Marketing is one of the top boutique lifestyle agencies here in Tampa. And so I think my niche kind of separates me out. I'm
not really interested in working with like insurance agents or a lot of people go like the healthcare route. I'm more lifestyle focused. And then I think authenticity, like just being transparent with my clients, kind of separates us out. If you're genuine when you're talking to your client, like when you're working with the CEO, everybody has a story to share, but it's getting them to open up and share that story with you so you can help them share their story with whatever publication that is. And so it's getting them to trust you because, again, once they share that story, someone else out there is going to relate to that brand and may be a loyal customer because of what they've shared.
Yeah. Have you turned down clients because you felt like they weren't a fit with that sort of core mission?
Yes. At first, I don't want to say I took on anyone and everyone because that definitely was not the case, but I kind of took on a wide variety of industries. I took on a roofing company, mortgage clients, hospitality. I was kind of all over the place just to figure out what I liked best and how I wanted to grow my company. I mean, it was all so new to me. But then just niching down came naturally. Yeah,
when you take that leap, it's very difficult to say no to anybody. You just want to work with anybody who's there. But yeah.
I knew there were things like I didn't want to get into politics. I didn't want to take on any public figures necessarily, like celebrities. I knew I didn't want to do healthcare. But besides that, I was kind of open to at least chatting and figuring out that company's needs.
Yeah. What role does technology play in the PR industry?
So much as our literal everyday lives. I think when it comes to just interviews in general, that's kind of changed for the PR world. When COVID hit, there was a lot like morning show segments went virtual via Zooms. I mean, as the publicist, I was on site a lot less, just kind of listening in, which honestly saves a lot of time because you're not taking that time that you're driving, being there for the client and then back. And then you can also, your face-to-face interviews that were phone are kind of now Zoom. So it's nice for the reporter to see the client face, the client to see the reporter's face. I feel like the conversation becomes more natural. And as far as just like the technology for us, there's so many new like public relations platforms that are coming out that are just really helpful, that whether it's a media database, the new platform I just signed up for is called Propel, and I can kind of track like who my team's reached out to. So if one of my team members reached out to you, Steve, I can be like, oh, this person reached out to him. Maybe I should like connect with her. Maybe she may already have a relationship before I reach out cold. And then you're not getting 10 emails from 10 different employees from the same company. So is
that a PR specific platform? It sounds kind of like a CRM system, but built for PR.
It's built for PR. You can create your media lists in there. And so that's something I've never seen before in my years being in the communications industry. So it's pretty cool to see stuff coming out like that just really helps our entire team.
How much of your outreach work on behalf of clients is... Sorry, it's Alexa talking.
Oh.
Something got delivered. I should turn that off. How much of your outreach work is to traditional media outlets versus sort of pure play digital outlets now?
I would say 50-50, and I think it depends on the client's goals as well. So I just opened up the Beyond Van Gogh exhibit in Sarasota that's run like the last 5-6 months, and for them it was ticket sales. We did a lot of morning show segments for the grand opening. We had a lot of reporters out there, event calendar listings, so it was a lot more traditional PR. But then on the flip side, say one of my clients is like a mortgage professional and who's doing more thought leadership, that is a lot more online stuff. It's a lot more Facebook Lives, Instagram Lives, which is just more the modern PR tactics nowadays. Like even podcasts, they've always been around, but it kind of falls under that more modern PR now too.
Yeah, but still seeing value in some of the traditional things.
Yes.
Like getting your client on a TV morning show or a radio morning show interview. Those things are still important. Getting press coverage in newspapers and magazines, that's still relevant?
Yes, we're doing that for all of our clients, but I think it's less like traditional versus modern PR tactics, and more, again, like, what is that client's goal? And then how can we help them reach that?
Yeah. What skills are most demand in your industry right now?
For me, I think there can be a common misperception with PR sometimes that all we do is plan grand openings and parties. I know when I interview, people are like, oh, like, what events have you been to this week? And I'll be like, I haven't. I've been head down in the office. And they're like, what? And so I think when it comes to skills, it's finding people who are people, who's a people person. Oh my goodness. And can go and be at a morning show and interact, like be there for the client. They can go to networking events and chat with people, but also they can be in the office and be head down and do that research. That's just really important for the PR side.
Speaking of events, is that like crisis management? Is that sort of a sub-discipline within PR? Are there firms that really just focus on executing sort of live events and experiences for clients? Is that something that's typical in a PR firm?
Yeah, I would say so. I think it just depends on your niche. Like, I have some clients who do events, grand openings, just depending on what happenings that client has going on.
Yeah. When you're working with a client as their PR firm, are you competing with other resources? Meaning, is there ever pressure put on you to, like, listen, Bailey, this sounds great and we like what you're doing, but we need to see a return on this. Like, we could be spending more money on performance marketing right now, or we could be spending more money on inbound, or we could invest more money into our outbound sales team. How do you justify your place in the budget as a PR firm?
This is honestly one of the toughest challenges when it comes to PR, because there isn't, especially when talking to executives who run all the finances, it's because there's not like a measurable factor. Like, a lot of PR is brand awareness and brand visibility. And people ask, well, like, what does that mean? And how do I measure that? And so every PR company, publicist, kind of does it a little different. It used to be like ad value and readership or impressions. I think now it's depending on their goals. Like, is it ticket sales? If you had a morning show segment and then that day you had a 25% increase in ticket sales, that was probably a direct correlation from that morning show that ran 3 times throughout the day. So it's tough in our industry proving the ROI, focusing on what you're measuring, but we always just ask our client, again, what are your goals? And then we kind of work with them to provide those key performance indicators.
Right. Tell me about some major pivot points in your career.
Yeah, I think that would kind of take me back to college, to be honest. I never grew out of that phase as a kid where I wanted to be a marine biologist. I went into school thinking that I would leave being a marine biologist, and about a semester in, I just realized it was more of a passion than it was so research, like numbers based, and I'm such a creative that it just wasn't working. Mm-hmm. And so I ran college track, and at the time I was really close with all the senior captains, and I just kind of shadowed them in a few different classes, and I kind of fell into business communications, wanted to be an ESPN reporter because I'm obsessed with sports, and learned quickly I'm a lot better behind the camera. So PR, just communications, came naturally. And so I worked with San Antonio Spurs for game nights, doing post-game recordings, interviews. After college, I worked for the Outback Bowl for a bowl season, which was so fun. I worked under the director of communications and just learned a lot about credentialing, how to manage PR, building relationships, how to pitch the right people. And then I kind of hit a point where I always thought I wanted to be in sports. I wanted to be the director of communications for a big sports team. And nowhere in Tampa, none of the sports teams here were hiring in their communications department. And I had just come back from San Antonio, Texas for 4 years. I wasn't about to be landlocked in wherever I needed to go to pursue that career. So I kind of got into agency life, and I haven't really looked back.
What part of that has been harder than you expected?
About agency life? I would say just every day is different. I think it's what I love most, but it's also what's most challenging is the first 30 minutes of every day, I'm catching up on news trends, I'm reading the newspaper, reading all the newsletters that are coming out, listening to any new podcasts, just to stay on top of the news cycle. But from there, every day is so different. And while I love it, it can also make it challenging sometimes to like plan out your schedule or adjust to things.
Yeah. What types of systems do you use to manage projects or your time? You know, what types of tools do you use?
Yeah, so our team uses Monday.com. And so I've kind of been looking at Notion recently because so many people love it, but I honestly don't find it as user-friendly as Monday. So we use Monday to manage everything from project PR timelines to internal like business employee directory, client directory, stuff like our weekly team meetings are all on there. So Monday is a big tool for us. We use Propel, which I had talked about earlier. And then for social media, we use Skewed Social, which is a scheduling platform, and then Airtable for like content planning. Right.
Are you remote? Do you have an office?
Yeah, so I just signed for an office at Industrious at Sparkman Wharf. Very cool. So it'll just be me for right now. Most of my team is remote in different cities, but what's so nice about that is they have the opportunity to go to an Industrious in their city. So as my team grows, I would love people locally to come in, but everyone's remote as of right now.
What do you like about doing business in Tampa? Why is Tampa a good place to be right now?
Because we are growing so fast. Like I said, I just got back from Key West last week, and I was gone for a week and a half. And I feel like every time I come home, there's like something new has opened, or I missed something, or it's just a really exciting city. And not to mention our sports teams. Like, I mean, we're in the Stanley Cup Finals for the third year, and it's just a really fun place to be right now. But business-wise, I think we have a lot of inspiring leaders here that is pretty cool to know that they're in our city and to look up to them, admire them, kind of see what they're doing. In Tampa, you have the opportunity, if you choose to surround yourself with other leaders in your industry, not in your industry, and kind of learn and grow from that.
Are there any local leaders that come to mind that you pay particular attention to?
I mean, Vinnick, I think overall he's just seems like I've never met him personally, but I love how he kind of runs all his organizations and just his charity work. And then just some other smaller people, but
yeah. How do you currently generate new business? How are you growing?
A lot of my new business has been referrals from just different people in my life. The more I'm sharing what we're doing, how we're niching down, just people are sending people my way, I'll chat with them and refer them out to other people. Or if they're a great fit, I send them a proposal and say, I would love to work with you. We're just growing so fast. It's been kind of crazy. Yeah. So I've done some cold outreach on LinkedIn to some like boutique hotel groups and restaurant groups, and seen success with that too.
Really? What was your approach?
I'll look at their Instagram, to be honest, and I'll kind of see what they're doing, whether they have a good strategy going, whether it looks like they have a strategy. If they're pushing video out, I'll get on Google News or our PR platform and kind of see what they're doing and if they've been mentioned in the media, and then I'll kind of find the appropriate contact or what I can find, and then I'll reach out and be like, hey, is social media, is PR a push for you this year? And if so, I would just love to connect. I have a few ideas.
Yeah. There's a lot of bad outreach on LinkedIn and things like that, but I really think it's a valuable place to be. And if you, like you said, if you put some time into it and really look at what somebody's doing and reach out with like helpful advice without sort of an expectation for, can you meet tomorrow? I really think it can be done well.
And I find them via LinkedIn, but I reach out via email. So I'll find their email and then reach out to them that way.
Yeah, that's smart too, because people reach out to me on LinkedIn and I don't
even look at it.
I don't check the inbox. So I feel bad. Like people that I met, a year or two ago will reach out on LinkedIn and it'll be like 2 weeks before I get back to them. I'm like, so sorry. Like I don't check this inbox thing.
I know, that's funny because I had a friend from high school reach out to me literally this week on LinkedIn and I was a little delayed. I was like, I'm so sorry, Matt. Like most of it's spam now, so I don't check it.
Well, I don't do Facebook Messenger either, and like I'm many
guilty.
People reach out on Facebook Messenger, and like somebody I was best friends with in high school will reach out, and it'll be like 3 months before I see it. I feel so terrible about that. What are some of your guiding principles on team leadership as you think about building out your business and your team? What's your leadership style?
I would say when it comes to leadership, just making sure that, one, you're leading by example. I can't expect my employees to work on themselves and grow, whether that's personally, financially, like business minded. If I'm not doing the same, I can't. It's like saying a personal trainer being like, you should be working out 5 times a week and they're not working out. Like just leading by example and then pouring into my people. I want to make sure that I'm there for them. They should always feel supported. They should never feel like they don't know what they're doing. If they need resources, like I want to be that person who can provide all of that for them. So it's definitely something. I'm obviously not perfect and I'm constantly like adjusting my leadership style and just how I'm supporting them. But I definitely have an open door policy.
Have you ever had a bad experience with a leader that you worked with or for that taught you something and that you use today and do things differently?
Yes, and it would be exactly what I just said. I think where some leaders can go wrong is they're not working on themselves or they're not growing, or especially in PR and social, it's changing it's daily, sometimes depending on the week. And so I think if you're not staying current with trends and keeping up to things and just growing as a person, I don't know how you run a business that way.
Yeah. Is there a lot of legacy thinking in PR? Because, there are PR firms that have been around for a long time, like back in the days where it was literally you had a real Rolodex and you just had the names of reporters and things, and like it was all about relationships, and you could call the TV station and get things done that way, or get a piece of print in the newspaper, and it's just so dramatically different now. Is there friction that's slowing companies down because they still live in the old model?
I don't know personally of any, but I would assume so. I know how I run my company is different than places I've worked in the past. But I would assume that there are people stuck, but I'm not sure.
Yeah. Any advice for people who would be thinking about entering the industry? What would you tell them?
I would tell them to start following, if they have like a specific topic or industry that they're interested in, to start following those newsletters, start getting those magazines, start reading. Just knowing the news cycle is so important. Knowing what the journalists are writing about, like knowing who's writing who's talking about what, is so important, because it's insulting to reach out to a journalist about a restaurant opening if they cover politics, and they're just going to block you. And if you read all the PR reports, like the annual reports, still journalists are getting so many emails from publicists about stuff that isn't timely or isn't even relevant to what they cover. So just making sure that you're reading, read, just so you kind of know what's going on.
Yeah. Well, listen, you made it a year. Congratulations. You made the leap.
Thank you so much.
Lots of people think about it. Not as many people do it, and even fewer make it. So you're growing. You're in a great space. Tampa's a wonderful place to be. I'm sure there's endless clients for you. So best of luck to you. I'm glad to be working with you, and congratulations. Thanks for doing this.
Thanks so much.